Welcome everyone. Today we'll talk about how to control your dopamine. You know that feeling when you get a notification on your phone or when someone likes your post on social media and you feel this little burst of satisfaction, right? That is dopamine in action. It is a brain chemical, a neurotransmitter, and it's got a major role in how we experience pleasure, motivation, and reward. But controlling it, that's where things get interesting. And it is something we can all learn to do, whether we are aware of it or not. Now, before we dive into the deeper stuff, let's get one thing straight. Dopamine is not inherently bad or good. It is just a messenger in our brain carrying signal related to motivation and reward. That's why you feel excited about eating your favorite food or finishing a task. But when dopamine becomes something we chase too often, it can lead us into the tricky situation, like constantly checking our phones or binging on the Netflix shows for hours without realizing it. And that's why learning how to manage it is so important. So, what exactly is dopamine doing up there in our head? Imagine this: when you do something enjoyable, like eating chocolate or receiving a compliment, your brain releases dopamine. It's almost like your brain saying, "Hey, this is great, let's do it more of it." And that release gives you a little jolt of pleasure and it reinforces the behavior. That's why we keep scrolling, keep snacking, and keep chasing those little hits of dopamine. The more we indulge in quick hit of dopamine, the more our brain start to expect them. It's like a shortcut that our brain takes. Over time, if you keep feeding it easy dopamine, it gets lazy. The thing that used to give you pleasure start to feel less rewarding. So you need more of them. Need more, find new ways to get that dopamine high. This is why after binging a TV series, you might not feel satisfied, or why you might find yourself scrolling endlessly on social media, even though nothing really exciting you. What is happening here is what you are essentially training your brain to expect more dopamine. It's kind of like when you build a tolerance for the caffeine. Over time, the same cup of coffee does not wake you up the way it used to. Your brain gets used to the dopamine and suddenly it needs more and more just to feel the same level of reward. It's called a dopamine deficit, and that's when things can start to spiral. But here is the good news: we are not a slave for our dopamine. But here is the good news: we are not slaves to our dopamine. In fact, by understanding how it works, we can learn to manage it and reset our brain reward system. The first step is recognizing the things in your life that are giving you those quick, easy dopamine hits. Think about the stuff that gives you that instant feeling of pleasure, like checking social media, snacking, or even the online shopping. These activities are probably not bad in the small doses, but when they become habit, they can start to take over, and that's when your brain's reward system start to get a bit skewed. To take control, you need to break the cycle of constant dopamine seeking. And trust me, it's not as hard as it sounds. One effective strategy is something called a dopamine detox. It's not as scary as it sounds. I promise you are not cutting dopamine out of your life entirely. That's impossible. You are just giving your brain a break from the constant hit of dopamine. It's like a reset button for your reward system. Here is how it works. For a set period of time, say a day or weekend, you avoid those activities that give you that quick dopamine rush. No social media, no junk food, no video games. It sounds tough, but what you are doing is allowing your brain to recalibrate. When you cut out those easy sources of dopamine, your brain starts to become more sensitive to the smaller, healthier source of it, like going to a walk, reading a book, or having a meaningful conversation. At first, you might feel bored or restless because your brain used to getting dopamine from all the usual places. But over time, you will notice that the simple pleasure start to feel more rewarding. You might feel more satisfied after finishing a task or spending time with friends. That's because you are teaching your brain to value the more meaningful, longer lasting source of dopamine rather than the quick fixes. It's kind of like rewiring your brain, but it's not just about the cutting out the bad stuff. You also want to start filling your life with activities that naturally boost your dopamine in healthy ways. Exercise is one of the best ways to do this. When you work out, your brain releases dopamine, but it's not the instant kinds of hit you get from the scrolling Instagram. It's a slower and more sustainable, and it's leave you feeling good long after workout is get over. Learning new thing is another great way to boost your dopamine in a healthy way. When you are learning a new skill like playing an instrument or solving a puzzle, your brain releases dopamine as reward for the progress you are making. And the cool thing about the learning is that the more you challenge yourself, the more dopamine will be get it. And that's why people can get hooked on the hobbies or become deeply passionate about mastering a skill. Sleep is another big player in the dopamine game. When you are sleep deprived, your brain ability to regulate dopamine is compromised, and that's why after a bad night's sleep you might feel sluggish and unmotivated. On the flip side, getting enough quality of sleep help your brain maintain healthy dopamine level, which makes you feel more alert, focused, and ready to on the day. And let's not forget about diet. What you eat play a huge role in how your brain produce dopamine. Certain foods are rich in the building block of dopamine like tyrosine and the amino acid found in food like almonds, eggs, and fish. A diet that balanced and full of these nutrients can help your brain producing dopamine naturally without relying on the constant hit from the sugar or caffeine. But beyond the physical stuff, there is also a mental component to controlling your dopamine. Mindfulness and meditation can help you become more aware of when you are chasing that dopamine high. By practicing mindfulness, you can start to notice the moment when you are mindlessly scrolling on your phone or reaching for a snack out of habit. This awareness is a key because it gives you the power to make conscious choices about where you get your dopamine from. When you take a step back and start noticing your pattern, you might realizing that a lot of things you have been doing for pleasure are not actually that satisfying. And that's the beauty of mindfulness. It gives you a space to reflect and choose activity that genuinely make you feel good rather than just giving you a quick dopamine hit. One of the things you will start to realizing as practice controlling your dopamine is that delay gratification. One of the things you will start to notice as you practice controlling your dopamine is that delaying gratification is a powerful tool. When you work towards a goal like completing a big project or saying up for something special, your brain starts to releasing dopamine in anticipation of the reward. The longer you work towards it, the more dopamine you get. And when you finally achieve that goal, the satisfaction is so much greater than the quick hit you get from the things like social media or junk food. In fact, this process of working towards a reward is one of the most effective way to rewire your brain relationship with the dopamine. Instead of the seeking out the immediate pleasure, you are training your brain to value long-term reward. It's a shift in the mindset, but it's incredibly rewarding once you get the hang of it. Now, controlling dopamine is not about the becoming a monk or deprived yourself of all the pleasure. It's about the finding the balance and being intentional about where your dopamine comes from. By reducing your reliance on those quick, easy dopamine hits and focusing on more meaningful, sustainable source of pleasure, you will find that you are more motivated, more focused, and more in control of your own happiness. And that's the key. Dopamine is not something to fear or suppress. It's a natural part of how our brain functions, and when we learn to manage it, we can use it for our advantage. Whether it's through the exercise, learning new things, practicing mindfulness, or simply enjoying a good meal. There are so many ways to experience dopamine in a healthy, balanced way. The goal is to make sure that you are not constantly chasing it, rather letting it fuel you in a way that enhances your life, not control it. So next time you feel the urge to check your phone for the 100th time or snack out of the boredom, take a moment to pause and think about where that urge is coming from. It's just your brain seeking dopamine, but you have the power to direct it towards something more meaningful. And once you start doing that, it will find that you are not just controlling your dopamine, you are taking control of your life. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video.